Imagine stepping into a field where you used to catch fireflies as a kid, but the bugs are, well, they're completely extinct. And the only thing left, like shimmering in that overgrown grass, is this synthetic blue-white buzzing of a broken down dystopian electrical grid. Today, we are looking at a single, incredibly quiet reunion between two rebels standing in that exact field, and this is in the year 2148. We are pulling apart a literary excerpt from the Firefly Rebellion, a Promise in Bloom, and specifically we're looking at chapter 8, which is titled Where We Were Alive.
Yeah, and it is a text that completely redefines how we look at historical and political resistance.
Mhm.
I mean, we are zooming in on just a couple of days, December 2nd and 3rd, 2148, focusing on just two people. There's Ayers, which is spelled I-R-E-S, but pronounced Iris, and Ivy. And the goal here, it isn't to look at the sprawling battles or the shifting front lines of this dystopian world. We're analyzing the anatomy of a rebellion by looking at what happens after the smoke clears
Right.
in this deeply intimate space between two survivors.
Right. Okay, let's unpack this because I like to think of this excerpt as it's almost like finding a single perfectly preserved photograph in the ashes of a burned down house. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely.
It's this tiny framed window into a massive unseen world. And the scene sets itself up so vividly right from the first line. We are placed in this overgrown field on December 2nd. The text explicitly tells us the fireflies are gone, but something, quote, shimmered where they used to be. And cutting through that shimmer, we get this stark, really jarring physical contrast between our two characters. Ayers is stepping through the tall grass, and she is described as having magenta hair, wearing heavy boots, and the narrative specifically says those boots pressed into the dirt like her soul was trying to root itself.
That phrase alone, it carries so much psychological weight. Trying to root itself. It tells us we are dealing with a character who has been entirely untethered by her environment.
Yeah, she's searching for ground.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In a dystopian landscape, people are displaced. They lose their homes, they lose their families, their sense of continuity. So the simple act of wearing heavy boots and consciously pressing them into the soil, it's an attempt to create gravity. She is desperate for a literal and, well, a metaphorical foundation in a world that has systematically denied her one.
And then you look at who she is walking toward, because Ivy is known in this world by the moniker the Talker.
Right.
And the text describes her with buzzed green hair, freckled shoulders, a torn jacket, and she is entirely barefoot. So you have Ayers, desperate to be rooted, wearing these heavy grounding boots, and Ivy, barefoot and torn, seemingly completely exposed to the elements. And she's standing in a field that might still hold, the dangerous remnants of whatever war just happened.
And what's fascinating here is the profound, suffocating silence of this reunion. I mean, think about it. Ivy's entire identity, her literal code name in this rebellion, is the Talker. Yet when Ayers finally finds her in this field, the text notes, they stared. No one moved. There is a massive, heavy pause spanning several paragraphs before a single, simple hi from Ivy and a mirrored hi from Ayers. And then, quote, the world fell away. The character defined by her voice chooses absolute silence.
It's really the inadequacy of language after trauma.
Precisely that. When you have survived the kind of systemic violence this setting implies, the superficial layer of communication just evaporates. Words become completely insufficient for the weight of the reality they're standing in. If you've been fighting a war where language has likely been used as propaganda.
Or a weapon.
Yes, a weapon or a tool for betrayal. Falling into silence is actually a profound expression of trust. Their silence isn't an absence of communication. It is a shared, hyperdense language of survival. They're verifying each other's physical reality before they dare to speak.
Wait, but look at the environment itself, because I want to push back on what that physical reality actually is. We are told they are in this overgrown field. The text says the fireflies are gone, but something shimmered where they used to be. Now, if the fireflies, like nature's actual organic shimmer, are gone, what exactly is left?
Right, what is this shimmer?
Yeah, is that shimmer a literal technological remnant, like synthetic lights buzzing in a fractured grid? Or is it a metaphor for the lingering ghosts of their past? Like, are they standing in an environment that their own rebellion destroyed?
Well, the intersection of the synthetic systems like the one they are fighting
I mean, that changes the entire tone of the reunion. It is not just a happy moment of survival, it is laced with this heavy guilt about the collateral damage of their actions.
Which perfectly contextualizes their move from that shimmering field to an old rock. The narrative grounds them by having them sit on this specific stone that holds deep historical context for them both. It's the place where Ivy once said, "I think fireflies understand me more than people."
Oh man, a line that just highlights how alienated she felt from humanity even before the world supposedly fell apart.
And sitting on this rock now, the text describes Ivy in a very intentional way. She looks older, brighter, but, quote, a little burned.
And Ayer's immediate internal reaction to that is that she wanted to kiss the burned parts, which is such an instinct to soothe the damage the world has inflicted on someone you love. But this is where the philosophy of their resistance actually comes into conflict. Ivy confesses, and the text says her voice is very soft. She says, "I lit it all up." Ayer's response, "I saw. And I lit things too, just smaller."
This exchange is the absolute crux of the excerpt. It synthesizes the mechanics of macro-rebellion versus micro-rebellion. Ivy represents the inferno.
Right.
I lit it all up. She was the massive topple buildings and overthrow governments. We tend to mythologize that kind of massive rebellion. We write textbooks about it. But the historical reality of the inferno is that it often consumes the very people who start it. Grand, sweeping revolutions frequently centralize power in the hands of the most ruthless. And they create power vacuums that invite even worse dictatorships. The cost of being an inferno is that you get burned. You consume yourself, and often you alienate the everyday people who are just trying to survive the crossfire.
Because Ivy's approach was a massive forest fire.
Exactly.
And a forest fire clears the dead wood, sure, like it changes the landscape undeniably and instantly, but it also scorches the earth so deeply that nothing can grow there for decades. The soil is rendered completely sterile, everything caught in the blaze is destroyed, regardless of innocence or guilt.
While Ayers represents the spark, I lit things too, just smaller. She maintained the micro-rebellion. And historically, decentralized, quiet resistance is mathematically much harder for an authoritarian regime to eradicate.
Right.
A regime can aim its military at a burning building, right, or an armed mob.
Right.
But it cannot aim a military at 10,000 separate invisible acts of defiance.
Ayers' method is a controlled burn. Or, honestly, even just a lantern. A lantern doesn't burn down the forest, it simply guides people through the dark. It keeps the path illuminated so that when the fire eventually dies down, people still know where to walk. I mean, we constantly praise the loud revolutionaries, the ones who throw the bombs or give the screaming speeches, but keeping a small flame alive in a hurricane without letting it consume you, I'd argue that requires an entirely different and maybe more sustainable kind of courage. I have to ask, is Ayers' method actually the braver of the two?
Well, the text brilliantly avoids pitting these two methods against each other in a hostile way. After this admission, they laugh together. The text says the laugh cracked the silence like a poem breaking into song. There was a deep mutual respect for the roles they each had to play. A successful resistance usually requires both. The inferno shocks the system into vulnerability, and the lantern ensures there's a path forward once the system cracks.
And the emotional toll of playing those roles, it leads into this deeply intimate scene later that night. They are lying under what the narrative calls a blank sky. And we get this imagery of absence again.
Yes.
No stars, no fireflies, no shimmering grid, just a suffocating blankness. And lying there, Ayers asks the most vulnerable question you can ask in a war zone. She says, "Do you think we'll ever be safe?"
Ivy's response here forms the emotional core of this entire piece. She looks up at that blank sky and says, "Maybe not. But I think we can be real."
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting to me. That specific exchange transcends the fictional year 2148. It is a direct commentary on modern emotional survival. I mean, think about how many people today stay in a safe but entirely miserable situation, like a dead-end corporate job that guarantees a paycheck but structurally crushes their soul, or a toxic relationship that is entirely predictable so it feels safe, but it requires the person to continually shrink themselves, or hide who they fundamentally are.
People choose a numbing, predictable safety over a terrifying, chaotic reality constantly. It is human nature to seek out the known, even if the known is slowly killing you.
Because being real requires a level of vulnerability that is objectively dangerous.
Yeah.
In this dystopian setting, physical safety is a lost cause. The regime, the war, the blank sky, none of it guarantees them a tomorrow. So choosing to be real, to be authentic, to love openly, to strip away the armor, that becomes the ultimate act of defiance. When an authoritarian system tries to force you into a uniform compliance, insisting on your own unique reality is a deeply rebellious act.
You are outlining the exact psychological mechanism of totalitarianism.
Hmm.
Totalitarian systems don't just want your obedience, they want your internal reality. They want to dictate what is true and what is false. When the system takes away your physical safety, the only territory you have left to defend is your authenticity. Saying, "I think we can be real," is the conscious decision to stop letting the regime define the parameters of their existence. They are reclaiming their humanity from a war that tried to turn Ivy into an inferno and Ayers into a soldier.
And that reclamation culminates in their promise to make it up as we go, which leads into this highly specific description of a kiss. The narrative says, not like before, not like longing, like knowing, like they had already done this in every lifetime.
Longing is fundamentally rooted in absence. When trauma dictates your life, you are perpetually stuck in a state of longing. You long for the idealized world before the war, or you anxiously long for some hypothetical future where the war is finally over and you are safe. Both of those states rob you of the present.
It's a mechanism to avoid the painful reality of the now.
But knowing is absolute, undeniable presence. It is a radical act of anchoring yourself in the current moment. They are no longer fighting for a hypothetical future or mourning a burned past. They are existing fully and completely right now. The text uses knowing to signify that their connection is the single undeniable truth left in a world of blank skies and destroyed fields.
They've finally stopped running. They've rooted themselves in each other. But they haven't stopped fighting, because the text immediately transitions us to the next morning. It is December 3rd, 2148. And the narrative completely shifts gears, moving from this deeply personal, emotional reunion to a brand new tactical approach to the rebellion.
They heal each other in the dark, and in the morning they are ready to act. But their methodology has radically evolved based on what they learned from being burned.
The text says, they built their rebellion small. Ivy is no longer lighting it all up. The new tactics are described as messages in wildflowers, codes hidden in graffiti, dreams slipped into Velvet's bloodstream like honeyed poison.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is a masterclass in systemic sabotage, and we have to look closely at the name of the oppressing system they are fighting, which is Velvet.
Such a deeply unsettling name for a totalitarian regime. I mean, Velvet.
It is brilliant world building. Velvet is soft, it's luxurious, it is culturally associated with comfort and wealth. But practically, Velvet is heavy, it's opaque, and it muffles sound. A regime named Velvet implies a system that doesn't just crush you with an iron fist or military tanks in the street, it suffocates you with comfort. It provides just enough synthetic algorithmic pleasure or mindless entertainment or chemical sedation to keep the population completely numb. It makes you forget that you are in a cage because the bars are padded.
So, what does this all mean for the listener? Like, how do we conceptualize this shift in their tactics? If the regime operates by putting you to sleep, Ivy's old method, the inferno, lighting it all up, it's completely ineffective. The old method is like taking a sledgehammer to a complex, toxic system. You might make a lot of noise, but the people who built the system will just label you a violent terrorist and use your actions to justify wrapping the population in even tighter layers of velvet.
It provides the regime with the perfect excuse to use their monopoly on violence.
Right. But the new method, slipping honeyed poison into Velvet's bloodstream, that is carbon monoxide. Or actually, it's like a computer virus. A sledgehammer smashes the computer, and that's Ivy's old way. But a virus is stealthy. It slips into the bloodstream. It takes over the whole system from within quietly. A sledgehammer is loud and invites retaliation. But carbon monoxide is lethal precisely because it doesn't smell like smoke. It slips into the architecture completely undetected. They are using beauty, like wildflowers, art, graffiti, dreams, as a subversive weapon against a system that relies on people being comfortably numb.
Honeyed poison operates on the principle that the system will eagerly consume the honey, the art, the culture, the media they are producing, unaware of the subversive poison hidden inside it until it has already circulated through the societal bloodstream. They have realized that you cannot fight velvet with fire. You fight velvet by slipping the antidote into the water supply. You wake up the people the system has put to sleep.
Which brings us to the final, incredibly vivid image of the excerpt. The text closes with this revelation, and wherever someone remembered who they were, there was Ivy. And there was Ayers, hand in hand, eyes forward, burning.
The fire hasn't been extinguished. It has simply moved from the external landscape into their internal drive. They are no longer burning down the physical world. They are burning with an unshakable internal purpose.
The overarching takeaway here is so profoundly hopeful, particularly for a dystopian narrative. I mean, it dismantles the myth that monumentally changing a corrupt or broken system always requires you to be the inferno. It tells us that you don't have to burn everything to the ground until you are nothing but ash. Sometimes the most dangerous, rebellious, and effective thing you can do is plant wildflowers. It's maintaining deep, authentic, personal connections in a world that profits immensely from your isolation and your loneliness. Sometimes resistance is simply the act of remembering who you are.
Which leaves us with a final thought to examine. The text uses velvet as a literal system of oppression in the fictional year 2148. But velvet operates as a mirror for any system, any routine, or any societal pressure in our current reality that numbs us, muffles our voices, and systematically lulls us into forgetting our true, authentic selves.
Yeah, the comfortable suffocation of the modern day.
So the question to carry with you after listening to this is, what is the velvet in your own daily life? What is the force, whether it's an algorithmic feed, a toxic corporate culture, or a comfortable but deeply unfulfilling routine that is quietly lulling you into forgetting who you are and what you stand for? And perhaps more importantly, what is the honeyed poison? What small, beautiful, subversive act of authenticity are you going to slip into the bloodstream to wake yourself back up?
The perfect question to walk away with, because sometimes you don't need to read the entire history of the war to understand how to fight it. Sometimes you just need to look closely at that single, perfectly preserved mechanism you found ticking in the wreckage and let it remind you of what is real.